At the age of 59, Brad Pitt finally broke the silence. The golden boy of Hollywood. The man who seemed untouchable. The star whose face was once considered the very definition of perfection, stood before the world and exposed 6 men who tried to break him. Not journalists, not critics, not jealous co-stars, but directors. The very people meant to shape his career had nearly destroyed it. For the first time in his life, Brad Pitt confessed what really happened behind the velvet curtains of Hollywood. And the story he told was not one of glamour, but of betrayal. Not of success, but of sabotage. Because in the cutthroat world of Hollywood, directors are worshipped like gods. And Brad Pitt, despite his fame, his power, his looks, discovered that sometimes these gods can become devils. So who were these 6 directors? And how exactly did they almost end the career of one of Hollywood's biggest stars? Let's begin. The first director, Brad Pitt, described him as a visionary, a man who critics once called a genius. But behind the scenes, Brad saw a different face. He was promised a masterpiece, a script that would redefine him, a film that would silence every critic who called him just a pretty face. But the reality? A disaster. The movie was rushed, the direction was reckless, and Brad was left stranded, trapped in a role that critics mocked for years. One magazine headline at the time was brutal. Brad Pitt delivers his dullest performance yet. But years later, Brad admitted, it wasn't dullness. It was despair. Because behind the camera, the director didn't guide him. He didn't inspire him. He humiliated him. Brad described how on set he felt invisible. Every suggestion he made was dismissed. Every scene he filmed was twisted. When the film finally flopped, it wasn't the director who carried the shame. It was Brad. And that scarred him. The second director. The next name cuts even deeper. Because this one didn't just waste Brad's talent, he played with his trust. Brad said he was lured into the project with promises. An Oscar-worthy story. A role that would finally crown him not just as a star, but as one of the greatest actors of his generation. He believed. He gave everything. He built his entire schedule around it. But when the film hit theaters, it was chaos. The story was incoherent. The editing butchered his work. And the performance that could have won him awards was reduced to nothing. Brad later admitted that this was the moment he questioned everything. He considered walking away from Hollywood. For months he avoided interviews, avoided cameras, because he felt betrayed, not just by the director, but by himself, for trusting him. The third director. This one was personal, because Brad once called him a friend. They had worked together before, shared dinners, shared laughter, shared visions of cinema. So when the project finally arrived, Brad said yes without hesitation. He trusted blindly, but that trust was shattered. Because when the movie released, Brad discovered something horrifying. Entire scenes he had filmed, cut. Dialogues he believed were the heart of the story, erased. Moments that showed his best work, deleted without warning. And worst of all, Brad wasn't told. He found out sitting in the theater, watching his own role vanish before his eyes. Years later, he confessed that betrayal hurt more than any bad review, because it wasn't just professional. It was personal. He realized, in Hollywood, even friends can stab you in the back. The fourth director. This one was different, a rising star in Hollywood. Young, arrogant, full of energy. Studios worshipped him. Magazines called him the next big thing. And Brad Pitt, ever the risk-taker, decided to give him a chance. It was a decision he would regret forever. The set was chaos, schedules broken, scripts rewritten overnight. And Brad described how the director treated him not as a collaborator, but as a puppet. Scenes were reshot endlessly, takes stretched until dawn. And when Brad asked questions, he was told to just trust the vision. But there was no vision. When the film finally premiered, critics called it soulless. They mocked Brad's performance, saying he looked bored, empty, uninspired. But the truth? He wasn't bored. He was drained. Destroyed by a director who cared more about his ego than his actors. The fifth director. Now we reach the darkest betrayal. Because this wasn't just about cinema. This was about Brad's personal life. He said this director dragged him into a storm of rumors, Not during filming, but after. Stories leaked. Headlines exploded. Brad's image was tarnished. And the most painful part? He realized those stories had been fed to the press by the very man who directed the movie. Why? To promote the film, to create scandal, to turn Brad Pitt's personal life into free publicity. For weeks, Brad couldn't escape the headlines. Every magazine twisted the story. Every reporter asked the same questions. And while the movie made money, Brad paid the price. He admitted that period almost broke him. Not as an actor, but as a human being. And then, there was the final name. The one Brad Pitt called the biggest mistake of my career. This was supposed to be art. A project so bold, so daring, that Brad believed it would cement his legacy. But instead, it nearly ended everything. The director was manipulative. On set, he mocked Brad's choices. He pushed him to humiliation. He tore down his confidence in front of the crew. Brad described nights when he went home broken, nights when he doubted if he had any talent at all. And when the film was released, it bombed spectacularly. Audiences hated it. Critics called it pretentious. And once again, Brad Pitt's name was dragged through the mud. For the first time in his career, he thought, maybe this was the end. Maybe Hollywood didn't need Brad Pitt anymore. The confession at 59. And yet, at 59, he stood strong. He confessed it all. He said those 6 directors taught him the most painful lesson of all. That in Hollywood, the greatest threat doesn't always come from the competition. It doesn't come from critics. It doesn't come from gossip. It comes from the very people you trust the most. The directors. The ones who promise greatness, but deliver destruction. The ones who claim they want you to shine, but secretly strip away your light. Brad Pitt's story is not just about 6 directors. It's about survival. It's about a man who was betrayed, humiliated, and broken, yet refused to disappear. Today, Brad Pitt is still here, still making films, still admired, still standing. But the scars of those 6 betrayals remain forever. And so, we're left with a question. If even Brad Pitt, the golden boy of Hollywood, could be manipulated like this, then who in this industry is truly safe? Because in the end, Hollywood is not just about talent, it's not just about beauty, it's not even about fame. It's about power, and when power is abused, even the brightest stars can be made to fall. So I'll leave you with this. Do you believe Brad Pitt's career was ruined by 6 reckless directors? Or was it Hollywood itself that tried to destroy him?